Hello there. In this video I'm going to be talking about a technique known as peel, and this is a really useful technique when you're writing essays where you need to commentate or analyse a particular piece of literature. Peel is an acronym. In this video we're going to go through what the acronym stands for and then give you a brief example of how you can actually use it in relation to a particular poem. So first of all, let's go through the acronym itself. There's lots of other acronyms out there. There's PQA, there's several others. They all pretty much do the same job, so as long as you know the principle behind it, you should be fine. Okay, so the first thing, P is a point. You need to make a claim of some kind, something specific. Don't just repeat the question that's in front of you, but say something about the text that you're talking about. A good tip here is to use really strong adjectives. The stronger, the better. It's a really good way of making sure the examiner knows very quickly that you get the text and what's happening. So make some sort of claim about the text or the words that you're trying to analyse. The next thing you need is evidence. It's no good just making a claim, you have to back it up and justify what you're saying. So you do this with evidence from the text. You can quote directly or you can paraphrase sections, but it's important that you refer specifically to the text. The next E, the second E, is to explain. So you take your evidence now and you show how it proves the point that you mentioned earlier. And the more detail you can do, or the more detail you can provide, the better. This is where you want to show connotations of something, for example. Really get into the text. Don't assume that what you're saying is clear. Make it really clear for the examiner, make it obvious. And then the final part, the L, is where you sum up what you've just said, show what you've just proved, and ideally tie it back into the main question, go back to the question, just remind the examiner or the reader that what you've just actually proved. And that's pretty much the structure for Peel. It's nice and simple. Okay, here's an example of an unseen poem from IGCSE literature a few years ago. This is the question: how does the poem convey to you the impact of what he saw? And it's based on a poem called Horses. Now we're just going to look at the first few lines here. So you can see the lines there. It's describing a winter in Berlin. The light had no light, the sky had no sky. The air was white like bread, like wet bread. So we're just going to do a Peel paragraph based purely on this beginning. It's useful to know, though, that later in the poem horses appear, and they're very fiery, they're very warm, very passionate, and they contrast sharply with this initial setting. So okay, let's have a look at how we can use Peel to describe this opening section. Okay, first point. Before the horses arrive, the Berlin winter is described as bleak, insipid, and lifeless. So I've got a nice rule of three there. I've got strong adjectives. It makes a claim. I'm saying this is what Berlin looks like before the horses arrive. So that's not really enough. I need to actually prove that and justify what I'm saying. So the next thing I need is some evidence. And here, the line, light without light, the sky without sky, is a kind of paradox. It seems unlikely. How can you have this one without the other? I don't want to go into too much more detail because that's what my next paragraph is going to do. So here you can see I explain it in a lot more detail. Again, good adjectives: empty and barren is the sky. It's not even a full sky, it's lacking something, and that's important because later the speaker seems to be more fulfilled when he sees the horses. And then it also carries on a little bit to explain the unusual simile, and again this ties in with the idea that the city is unpleasant, it's bland, it's not very useful, much like soggy bread. And then finally, there's a link back to the actual question. I sum up what I've said here. Berlin is negative and dark, and the writer does this because he wants to contrast with the arrival of the horses, which is going to be important, and it's going to have a big effect on the speaker, and that's really what the question is asking. And it just explains the technical side of this contrast ensures that the sight of the horses and the impact of the horses is even greater because it's set against a very bland setting. So there we are. I've summed everything up, and then if we tie it all together, you can see what that looks like. I've colour-coded it there, but obviously in an exam, that's just one paragraph. You can have a look through that. Hopefully you can see how it introduces a point, gives some evidence for that point, explains the point, and then goes back to the question to show that I'm focused and I'm on track. And there you are. That is pretty much how to do a Peel paragraph. So I hope that's of some use.